So, continuing in the vein of ground, having done that for AC and DC, AC low frequencies, very low frequencies, we'll now go to consider ground for RF. And specifically in this segment, we're going to focus on just the locale, the ground upon which your ham shack sits. And in that regards, let me switch over to my chalk and talk. Let's see, yeah, here we go. We're going to be talking about, well, starting with basically our antenna. So, let me give that a little straighter aspect. Okay, so given this, sorry about that, we now have to consider the ground system. Of course, we have, let me illustrate here. This is sitting in the field. Such as that. This is a perspective view. This is the horizon, so to speak. The antenna, the mast, the structure needs a ground system, and the one that you're most familiar with, perhaps, is the radial system that I mentioned earlier. I'm going to tie that to one point, and I'm going to call that this point here. And layout. Let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 6 radials. Is that enough? Or even what are the radials doing there anyway? Basically, the radials are there to shield the power that's being emitted from the structure some of which penetrates into the ground. The radials serve to take up that current, put it back into the structure, and increase the efficiency of the entire system. How effective are these 6 radials? Well, we'll look at some numbers here soon, but but this all stems back to the work of Brown, Lewis, and Epstein, 3 authors of a very significant paper on the study of the efficiency of antenna systems, and this is a monopole. Compared to the ground about it, which is lossy, signified by these hash marks on the lower radiation points. That seminal work eventually led to them proposing that all radio systems, basically all AM radio transmitters, employ a ground field of 120 radials. That's certainly far more than this. And you can see that this contribution of all this metal is going to shield the radio wave from the effects of the lossy ground beneath. Now that's all very well and easy to say. Let's look at the actual, oh goodness, I haven't got this done, so let me. So here I'm going to include a screenshot of the front page of this seminal work, Ground Systems as a Factor in Antenna Efficiency by Brown, Lewis, and Epstein. So this is from 1937. So this is a fairly old work, but nothing has changed in the regard of the science of this necessity. And we're going to move on to another, something that's a little more accessible. This one is chock full of formulas and their constraints and how they're applied, and even to the point of they don't have 120 radials, they have 119 because they ran out of wire. We'll look at that too. So here we have maximum gain radial ground systems for vertical antennas by Al Chrisman, K3LC. And I'll scroll down to the bottom of the page just so this is from March, April 2004. So, if you notice over here, we have various case studies of using 125 feet of wire, 250 feet, 500, and we're doubling lengths of wire into 1 to 900 radials. The shape of each of these wire length peaks shows the efficiency gains and then losses through applying, say, 125 feet of wire into, let's see, 1, 2, 3 radials. 3 radials with 125 feet of wire. Well, that's what, 40 foot radials. This is for a 40-meter vertical antenna over average ground. I should have mentioned that up front. So let's rewind here. This is there are several of these. There's this. This is a 40-meter vertical antenna over average ground. We'll talk about average ground sometime later. But all things being average, this is the performance that you might expect from that 40-meter antenna for the variety of conditions, number of radials, and the amount of wire that's available to those radials. We do this again, on the page down here, for an 80-meter vertical over the same average ground, using the same number of radials. These are untuned radials, by the way. These, because you're in such a tight bonding with ground, it's lossy. It removes any sense of there being tuning involved. And the last application is 160 meter, which is closer to the Brown, Lewis, and Epstein model. They used 3 megahertz as their test bed. So 160 meters or 80 meters is encapsulates their seminal work. So returning to the 40-meter vertical antenna over average ground, if we had 125 feet of wire available to us, this peak denotes the best we could hope from the system is a 1.5 dB loss compared to the reference of 0 dB. Why that 0 dB there? This is, we'll go into that later. The point of the matter is the peak application of 125 feet of wire is into 8 or 9 radials. So you divide that 8 or 9 radials into the 125 feet, and that's how long they are. However, our goal is not to achieve minus 1.5 dB. It's, could I get plus 1? There's a 3 dB change right there. 3 dB is not something to sneeze at, believe me. That's very difficult to achieve. The gains of 3 dB anywhere in the antenna system are remarkable. And doing it at the right at the ground, where there's no ladders involved, believe me, this is the simplest. This is low-hanging fruit. However, it's going to cost you 8,000 feet of wire And you're going to have to bury, well, let's see, 100. Verging on 120, which is going back to Brown, Lewis, and Epstein. So, again, 8,000 feet of wire invested into about at least 100 radials will give you a 3 dB efficiency gain over just having 8 radials. 8, 120 out there. Well, all good and well for 40 meters. How does that track down to 80 meters? We still have the same bound, minus to plus 1.5 dB. However, we're now speaking of twice as much wire in this suite of tests. They all exhibit the same curvature. We peak here at minus 1 dB for 250 feet of wire. Previously it was half that amount, and now we're up to 10 radials. So if we were to double, 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 and double again, we would be, so reaching for that, well, no, now less than 2.5 dB gain. So we're really struggling here to achieve the same performance of the 40 meter antenna system in the 80 meter, and we've just doubled the amount of wire, 16,000 feet. That's 3 fucking miles. Okay. Pardon my French. If we look at this at the 160 meter, well, we can see that, well, we're up to 32,000 feet of wire. If we stood with the same 16,000 feet, but at a smaller number, let's see, that's, looks like about that looks like about 80 radials over the last 16,000 feet for 80 meter band. Well, we're still holding at 1.5 dB above zero. But again, we've doubled the amount of feet, volume of wire that's going into this ground system, 32,000 feet. Okay, how many 160 meter operators do we have here? This is your investment. It's a lot of wire. So that's a quick survey of sources that you can consult for the vagaries of planting more metal into Earth and what you might get from it. More power to you is the hallmark of this. So I'm going to leave it at that. We can go vastly deeper, believe me, but hitting the highlights here and giving you references will move you down the road towards a more robust ham experience. 73s.